Sometimes the silence is louder than grief. That thought haunted Emily Carter every morning as she walked through the halls of her grand Vermont estate. Once a place of light, laughter, and ordinary Sunday chaos, and now a mausoleum of memories. She barely recognized the woman she had become, the elegant so-turned widow, mother, and reluctant prisoner of her own sorrow. From her vantage point on the balcony, she saw the garden. It had surrendered to neglect. Roses drooped as though mourning. The grass grew in reckless patches. The swing James had hung for Lucas creaked with every gust of wind, a ghostly whisper of childhood laughter that had long since died. Because James was dead, and with him, all the Sunday dinners, the invitations to neighbors, the smell of grilling, the sound of children shrieking in joy. Emily's fingers clenched the railing. Her heart felt heavy, as though weighted with guilt and longing. She thought often of James, his warm hands, his laughter booming across the table, the way he teased the children. But those memories felt dangerous now, too sharp, too raw. Inside, Lucas and Sophia were shadows. Lucas, 9, rarely spoke. He spent hours with one toy car, pushing it across the same stretch of floor as though repeating a ritual would return something real. Sophia, age 6, retreated to her rag doll, whispering secrets only it could hear, her small lips pressed together as though the world beyond her toy was too loud. Dinner had become a hallowed silence. Emily still set the long oak table for 3, plates, silverware, cloth napkins. But when she sat down, steam rising from her soup bowl, she was the only one eating. She stared at her children, pleading with her eyes. Lucas poked at his food. Sophia asked for crackers instead. Sometimes Emily didn't even ask anymore. Her voice cracked too easily. That morning, the sky wept, gray clouds swollen with promises of rain. The air felt suspended. Emily lingered longer in bed, as though hiding from what the day would bring. But routine dragged her up. She passed rooms filled with dust and echoes. The grand piano stood in the living room, covered with a white sheet, like a corpse in shrouds. She hadn't touched it. No one had. In the box room behind the garage, she paused. She could smell smoke, but it wasn't wood smoke from winter. It was something foreign and oddly comforting. She frowned, unsettled. She considered going back inside, telling herself she was imagining things. But the scent, rosemary, char, warm bread, pulled her forward. Outside, beyond the kitchen door, she saw him, Daniel Cooper, the gardener. The man she'd barely allowed into her attention. He had entered quietly through the back gate, toolbox in hand, cap pulled low. No greeting. No meeting of eyes. Just work. That was how she liked it, for months. Now, on a patch of cleared earth beside the old grill, a small fire flickered. Smoke curled upward. Daniel stood nearby, turning a wire rack. In his hands, bread and scraps of meat. He was cooking. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. The children were there, too, or would be soon. She forced herself to move quietly to the window. Sophia stood at the glass door, clutching her doll, her nose lifted, eyes wide. Lucas hovered in the shadows behind her. Emily's throat ached. Daniel didn't turn to them. He said, in his quiet, steady voice, "Want to try a piece?" No pleading, no demand, just an offer. Sophia didn't answer, but she moved. Her footsteps echoed across stone tiles. She stood by the bench where the plate lay. She reached out, took one, bit. The crust cracked under her teeth. The sound was tiny, but earthquake to the silence. Lucas gasped. He stepped forward, eyes wide. She watched them, held her breath. Her own tears blurred the glass. Lucas asked, voice cracking, "What about me?" Daniel paused, then lifted another slice with butter. "Here." The gesture was simple, but it opened something. Lucas sat on the cold stone floor beside his sister. His shoulders slumped. He ate. Every bite reawakened him. Sophia sniffed the air, eyes closed. A tear slid down her cheek, an offering to memory, to pain, to love. Her lips quivered. Emily's chest tightened. She wanted to rush out, to stop him, but something held her back. She stayed in the shadows. Daniel murmured, "Your father loved Sundays like this. Gathering people, food, fire, laughter." He paused. "He planted rosemary here, right?" Lucas nodded, still chewing. He stood, disappeared into the shed, and returned with dust-coated rosemary bundles. He held them out. He said cooking without rosemary was no fun. Emily's heart lurched. She recognized the fragile bundle. It was James's habit. Her breath caught in her throat. Daniel sprinkled the herb over the meat. The smell deepened, rising like a spirit. Daniel spoke again, softly. You know, in the Bible, after resurrection, the first thing Jesus did was build a fire to cook breakfast for his friends. Not steak, but fish. Still fire. Still a table. Still communion. He glanced at the children. Do you think he knew they were sad? Lucas nodded. He didn't preach. Didn't lecture. Just cooked. The fire crackled. The smoke curled. The house trembled. Inside, Emily slipped away. She had to sit down somewhere. On the staircase, in the hall, wherever her legs held. She pressed her hand to her lips, trying to catch the tremors. Her eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. She heard Sophia whisper, "It tastes like sunlight." Lucas laughed, a fragile, uncertain sound. He nudged her sister gently. Try it slowly. Their voices, softer than she remembered, but alive. Out in the yard, Daniel stood back a little, watching. His face unreadable in the morning gloom. He didn't intrude. He just stayed, a gardener resurrecting more than just plants. Emily didn't move. She couldn't. The house behind her suddenly seemed enormous, cavernous, waiting. For a moment, she wondered if she was safe to come out, to walk with them in the yard, to touch the children, to feel something again. But fear stopped her. Loss told her not to hope. She sat there, torn between collapse and motion, listening to the small symphony of a fire, children's voices, and rosemary in the flame. And the silence in her heart cracked. Because someone had brought back Sunday. Because bread had broken something besides hunger. Because smoke could wake more than memories. Because maybe, just maybe, the house could live again. She didn't know yet whether she could live, too. She only knew she was watching. And she was waiting. He hadn't asked for permission. He had simply built a fire, set out bread and meat, and said, "Come and eat." That was all Daniel Cooper did. But to some, it felt like he had trespassed into sacred ground. Behind the kitchen window, Vera watched in rigid horror. The longtime housekeeper, who had kept order and silence in the house ever since James Carter's death, stood like a sentry at her post. Her lips tightened. Her chest rose with indignation. Then, with a swift tug, she yanked the curtain shut and marched toward the landline phone. "Nonsense," she hissed under her breath. "That's not how you care for traumatized children." Her fingers stabbed at the dial, already muttering to herself before anyone picked up. When Emily answered, her voice was quiet, uncertain. "Mrs. Emily," Vera snapped. "You must come home at once. The gardener is grilling with the children." Grilling. Feeding them in the dirt like it's a picnic. This will only traumatize them further. Emily froze, clutching the phone. Her heart thumped in her chest. Her grip tightened. She didn't know it yet, but that call would become the beginning of the most important decision of her life. Outside, the smoke drifted lazily into the afternoon air. The scent of rosemary, garlic, and charred bread carried the weight of memory. Lucas licked his greasy fingers. Sophia giggled as she offered Max, their golden retriever, a piece of bread. The dog accepted it gently, tail wagging like old times. Daniel moved slowly, calmly, letting the food speak louder than words. He didn't interrupt the moment. He simply tended to the fire like someone tending a shrine. For him, this wasn't just grilling. It was remembering. Sophia still clutched her rag doll, but now she also held a slice of bread in her other hand, and somehow, both seemed equally precious. Her doll for comfort, the bread for hope. "Is it good?" Daniel asked softly. Sophia nodded, her mouth full. Lucas, with crumbs on his shirt, held out his plate. "Is there more?" Daniel refilled it silently. He knew this hunger wasn't just about food. It was something deeper, hunger for presence, for permission to feel joy again. But not all witnesses saw healing. Vera had returned to her post, her face now flushed. She yanked the curtain again and muttered, "This will destroy them." She grabbed the phone once more. "Mrs. Emily, that gardener is meddling with things that should not be touched. Everything will get worse. I've warned you." Emily didn't reply. She took a breath, shallow and shaky. On the other end of the line, Vera's words echoed, but something inside Emily didn't move. She hung up. In the garden, the children were laughing. Lucas wiped his oily hands on his shirt, laughing as a streak of grease left a trail. Dad always said, "If you don't get messy while grilling, you're not doing it right." Sophia's eyes widened. The word dad had become a relic. No one had said it aloud since the funeral. Did Dad really say that? She asked quietly. Daniel turned the meat without missing a beat. He did. Every single time. Sophia hugged her doll tighter. I want Dad to come back. Daniel didn't offer false hope. He plated a small piece of meat and handed it to her gently. Your father can't come back, princess. But love doesn't die. It just changes shape. Right now, it smells like rosemary and garlic. She took a bite, her cheeks wet with tears, but her lips curved upward. It was the first time grief and joy sat side by side on her small face. Then, from behind the hedge, footsteps. Emily had come home. She had entered quietly through the side gate, her heels sinking into the grass. Vera's words still echoed in her head, but the smell that hit her, James's smell, Sunday's smell, stopped her breath. Her chest ached. Her pulse raced. And yet, her feet kept walking. At the edge of the garden, she saw them. Lucas, smiling. Sophia, giggling. Daniel, calm. Flipping meat like this was all perfectly normal. Emily's throat tightened. The fire crackled. Smoke curled in the air. What is happening here? Her voice cracked, sharp and uncertain. The children turned, startled. Lucas held up his bread like an offering. Mom, he said, it tastes like Dad's Sundays. The words knocked the breath out of her. Her legs wobbled. Tears rose. She took another step. Who permitted this? She asked, now directly at Daniel. He looked at her calmly. I didn't ask for permission, Mrs. Emily. I lit the fire. The children came. They're fragile, she said, barely holding herself together. Any of this could shatter them. Daniel's voice didn't waver. Silence has already shattered them. What they need now is connection. The smell, the taste, the laughter. That's what brings memory home in a way that doesn't destroy. Emily's hands trembled. You don't get to decide that. No, he said gently. But neither does fear. Lucas stepped forward, a crumb stuck to his cheek. Please, Mom, just sit with us. Before she could answer, the back door flew open. Mrs. Emily. Vera charged out, apron flapping, expression furious. This is unacceptable. I warned you. He's grilling in the middle of the garden like it's a holiday, stirring the children's memories like it's healing when it's poison. Lucas flinched. Sophia shrank behind her mother's leg. The piece shattered. Daniel stepped forward slightly, protective but composed. They aren't breaking, Vera. They're remembering. Vera ignored him. Mrs. Emily, this is exactly how everything gets worse. You'll see. He doesn't belong here. He's dangerous. Emily turned to her slowly. Her mouth opened, but this time, no script came out. Only something instinctual. Maternal. Real. Enough, Vera. The housekeeper froze. I said enough. Vera's mouth twitched. But please, Emily said softly. Go inside. Vera hesitated. Mrs. Emily, you'll regret this. Emily glanced at her children. Lucas offering her bread. Sophia leaning against her leg, smiling through crumbs. No, Emily whispered. I don't think I will. Vera stood motionless for a moment, then turned and stormed back into the house. Emily sat slowly on the bench beside her daughter. She didn't say anything. She didn't know what to say. Lucas nudged the plate toward her again. Just try it, Mom. She looked at the bread, charred edges, butter glistening, a sprig of rosemary resting on top. She took a bite. The crust cracked between her teeth, and everything cracked with it. She didn't cry, but she did exhale for the first time in months. Emily raised a hand to calm things, but Daniel didn't retreat. With respect, ma'am, he said, his voice steady as coals. What's truly outrageous is 2 children going 8 months without laughter. He pointed to Lucas's plate. Clean, not a crumb left. Today, for the first time, this plate is spotless. Emily swallowed hard. The weight of the truth in his words pressed against her chest. She didn't have a response. But Vera did. Children don't need fire and smoke, she snapped. They need discipline. They need stability. And most of all, they need to forget what happened. If we keep reminding them of their dead father, they will never move on. The word forget dropped like a brick in the garden. Lucas stepped forward, his hands trembling. I don't want to forget Dad. Everything went still. Daniel stopped moving. Even the wind seemed to hush. Sophia clutched her ragdoll tighter and looked up with wide, glassy eyes. We just want to remember Dad. Without being sad. Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Her tears came fast, spilling between her fingers. For 8 months, she had worked so hard to protect her children from pain that she had walled off joy as well. She realized then, it hadn't kept them safe. It had kept them silent. Daniel spoke again, gentle but unwavering. Mrs. Emily, the fire here is not just charcoal. It is memory. It is faith. As it is written, the joy of the Lord is our strength. These Sundays can become sacred again for your family, if you allow them to. She looked at her children, at their eyes, finally lit with something real. Before, they had moved like shadows. Now, they were alive. Lucas's cheeks were flushed, Sophia's lips stained with grease and joy. But she had to choose. Right here. Between fear and faith. Between silence and memory. She took a deep breath and slowly approached the grill. Daniel stepped aside, offering her the tongs with a piece of meat still sizzling, fragrant with rosemary. Would you like to taste it? Her hand trembled as she reached out. It was just a piece of meat, simple, charred, nothing fancy. No banquet, no tablecloth, no crystal glasses. But as she brought it closer, the aroma unlocked something ancient. James's laughter, the sound of him tossing Lucas into the air. Sophia with ketchup on her nose. James wearing that ridiculous apron that said, Grill Master, World's Okayest Chef. She took a small bite, closed her eyes, and wept. It's the same flavor, she whispered. The flavor of Sundays with him. Lucas beamed. Sophia clapped her hands, her face shining. Behind them, Vera took a step back, her face twisted in disbelief. Mrs. Emily, she barked. You cannot be this weak. You will lose control of this house. Emily turned. Her voice cracked, but it carried weight. I've already lost too much, Vera. Her voice rose. No longer just grief, but clarity. What I will not lose again is my children's smiles. The silence that followed wasn't tense. It wasn't hollow. It was decisive. Vera's mouth opened, then closed. She stood frozen on the edge of the porch, alone in her disapproval. Emily didn't know what came next, but something inside her had shifted. The kind of shift that doesn't move furniture, it moves foundations. The sun began its descent over Vermont, golden light slipping through the trees. Smoke curled lazily above the dying fire. The smell of grilled meat lingered in the garden like incense. It wasn't just food anymore. It was memory made real. She stepped away from the grill. Her heart pounded with something unfamiliar. Hope. James was gone. That would never change. But maybe remembering him didn't have to mean reopening wounds. Maybe it could be healing, too. Lucas and Sophia were still eating, Messier now, freer. Lucas's plate was clean again. Sophia had laid her doll down on the bench so she could eat with both hands, something she hadn't done in nearly a year. Emily watched through teary eyes. But a question gnawed inside her. What if this new beginning doesn't last? What if it's just a moment? What if joy comes only to vanish again? Daniel put out the fire quietly, covering the grill and collecting the utensils. He didn't say anything until he saw her looking. Mrs. Emily, he said softly, I know this isn't what you planned today, but sometimes what we need most isn't found in the comfort of the mansion. It's in the simplicity of the backyard. She exhaled, shaky. I'm just afraid, Daniel. Afraid that remembering will break them again. That it will break me. Daniel nodded, placing a hand on the backrest of the bench. Forgive my bluntness, he said, but it is not silence that heals. It is love. She looked at him, puzzled. Longing doesn't vanish when we hide it. It transforms when we learn how to season it. Season longing? She asked, sitting down slowly beside him. Daniel looked at the dying embers. Raw grief is like raw meat. Bitter, tough, sometimes impossible to swallow. But when you season it, with faith, with memory, with gratitude, it becomes something nourishing. The words pierced her more deeply than she expected. She opened her mouth, but before she could reply, Mom, Lucas came running, out of breath, holding something in both hands. A worn notebook. I found this in the storage room. It's Dad's recipe book. Emily's eyes widened. She hadn't seen that book since before the accident. James's handwriting, always slightly tilted, filled the pages. Lucas flipped it open with reverence. Look, Mom, it says I like my meat well done. He turned another page. And Sophia's favorite was grilled corn. Sophia tiptoed closer, eyes wide. He remembered us in everything. Emily pulled both children into her arms. The notebook between them. The past, the present, and what could still be. I thought that by erasing memories, you would hurt less, she whispered. But I was wrong. Daniel, still seated, spoke one last time. Healing doesn't come by erasing, but by remembering with love. That's what the Lord taught. When he broke the bread, he said, "Do this in remembrance of me." It was quiet again, but this silence was different. Not grief. Reflection. Rebirth. Emily looked at the charred grill, the recipe book, the children pressing their cheeks against hers. The house, she realized, didn't need to be a museum of loss. It could become a sanctuary of memory. She turned to Daniel. "Do you think James would be pleased?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "I'm sure of it. Because his legacy wasn't in what he left behind, but who he left behind." Lucas raised his hand, eager. "Can we do this every Sunday? Like Dad did?" Sophia clapped. "And let's pray too, like Daniel said Jesus did." Emily smiled. This time, it wasn't a mask. "If you want it," she said, "we'll do it every Sunday." As the orange sky deepened into dusk, laughter echoed across the Carter garden. Max barked. Leaves rustled. Plates clinked. And for the first time in 8 months, the mansion was no longer silent. It was alive. "Mrs. Emily," Vera said, her voice low but sharp as a blade sheathed in velvet. "This isn't good. Mr. James is gone. Reviving those Sundays will only confuse the children more." Emily stood still. Her heart pounded, her hands cold. But there was something else stirring now. Something firmer than fear. She turned to Vera. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. "Vera, for 8 months, I followed your rules. Silence. Structure. Control. The result? Full plates and empty children." She paused, her throat tight. "But today, I saw Lucas laugh. I saw Sophia feed herself without me begging. I saw them both reach for joy. Please, don't ask me to give that up." Vera bit her lower lip, visibly bristling, but she stepped back. Her eyes darted to Daniel, who had been listening from a respectful distance. He approached slowly, as if not to break the fragile air between them. "May I suggest something?" he asked gently. Emily nodded, wiping her hands on her skirt. She felt like someone learning how to breathe again. "Why don't we set the table right here in the garden?" Daniel said. "After all, this is where everything began. The fire, the bread, the meat, the memory. You said you wanted them to remember with love. Let this table be the altar of memory." Emily looked around. The old dining room inside the house had become a cold chamber of grief, its long table untouched, too heavy with memory. But out here, among grass and breeze and bird call, it felt like possibility. "Let's try it," she said quietly. Daniel went to the shed and pulled out a wooden table, dusty, weathered, but sturdy. Lucas dashed off to find mismatched chairs. Sophia picked wildflowers, her tiny hands careful with every stem. Even Max, their golden retriever, barked and wagged his tail, circling the yard like he was part of the setup team. Emily watched in silence. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't perfect. But it was beautiful. Daniel spread a cloth over the table, then placed James's old recipe book right in the center. "This," he said, "is our compass. One recipe each Sunday, one memory at a time." Emily stepped forward, fingertips brushing the worn leather cover. James's handwriting still covered the pages, smudged with sauce, stained with years of laughter and spice. "James used to say," she murmured, "cooking is loving through aroma and taste." Daniel smiled. "Then today let's love that way." But before they began the meal, Daniel did something that caught everyone off guard. He removed his cap and bowed his head. "Before we eat," he said, "let's give thanks." The children hesitated. They weren't used to praying. Emily wasn't either, not recently. But Daniel's voice had a calm that invited without forcing. "The Lord did this with his friends," he said. "He broke the bread, gave thanks, and said, 'Do this in remembrance of me.' Today, we do this in remembrance of James." Lucas reached out and held his mother's hand. Sophia gently placed her tiny hand over Daniel's. "Father," Daniel prayed, "thank you for the bread, for the meat, for this family, and for memories that do not die. Let this Sunday be the first of many." Emily wept, not with the despair that had followed her for 8 months, but with a strange new emotion. Gratitude. The following Sunday arrived with sunlight as golden as the grilled corn they would soon cook. A breeze swept through the backyard, carrying laughter and the rhythmic creak of the old swing Lucas had helped Daniel repair. Daniel came early with a sack of vegetables from the local farmer's market. He wore a faded blue shirt, sleeves rolled up, and started the fire with the care of a man tending something sacred. But this time, he wasn't alone. Lucas stood beside him, clutching sprigs of rosemary. Daniel showed him how to rub the herbs between his palms to release their scent. Sophia sat on the back steps, proudly wearing a tiny apron Emily had sewn from scraps. She folded napkins into heart shapes with focus and glee. Max supervised from under the bench, hoping for dropped crumbs. From the balcony, Emily watched with a steaming cup of tea in hand. But her eyes weren't on the cup. They followed every small gesture outside. Lucas's laughter, Sophia's proud arranging, Daniel's calm guidance. Her gaze, once empty, now brimmed with awe. Daniel didn't teach like a teacher. He guided with gentleness. He let Lucas make mistakes. When the boy dropped a sprig of rosemary, Daniel only smiled. Sophia ran to help. They both giggled when Max licked a stick of butter clean off a plate. That day's meal was simple: grilled corn, garlic bread, and rosemary-seasoned meat. But every bite tasted like something bigger than food. Before eating, Daniel set the notebook on the table again. "Today," he said, "we cook from James's recipe." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her husband's writing was still vivid on the yellowed page. "Cooking," he had written, "is how we turn love into something people can touch." Lucas sat beside Daniel, tall and proud. Sophia clung to Emily, her tiny hand wrapped tightly around hers under the table. As they bowed their heads, Emily opened her eyes for a moment. The garden, once a symbol of what was lost, now pulsed with life. "Thank you, Lord," Daniel prayed softly, "for this meal, for these memories, and for new beginnings." All four echoed, "Amen." The meal began. Laughter broke the air like birdsong. The smell of smoke danced above the table like incense. After eating, Emily stayed seated as the children chased Max across the lawn. Daniel quietly cleared the plates. When he noticed Emily sitting alone, he approached gently. "You okay?" She nodded. "I never thought sitting with memories could feel this light." Daniel didn't answer. He sat beside her, both of them facing the garden, as if watching the future run barefoot right in front of them. A long moment passed in silence. Emily turned to him, not just with gratitude, but with something new, something softer. It was the look of someone who had started to believe that peace might not be an illusion after all. A year had passed since the first piece of grilled bread broke the silence. Each Sunday had become a quiet ritual, of bread, of laughter, of stories told through scent and seasoning. No one called it healing anymore. They didn't need to. It simply was. But today, something felt different. Even the garden knew it. The air held a hum. The leaves stirred with an unusual softness, as if whispering among themselves that something sacred was about to unfold. The table was set under the maple tree, the same table that had once carried only sorrow and now bore dishes filled with rosemary, garlic, and love. Sophia had tied napkins with wildflowers. Lucas arranged plates with the care of someone handling treasure. Emily, in a soft summer dress, stood by the grill with Daniel, brushing bread with oil. They worked together in rhythm, like they had for months, like they had always belonged in that space together. But Daniel was quieter than usual. As the last of the meat finished cooking, he stepped away from the grill. He wiped his hands on his apron, took a breath deeper than any before, and turned to the small gathering. "Everyone," he said, his voice slightly trembling. "Today, I want to serve something that's not on the menu." Emily looked up. The children paused. Even Max, from his usual spot under the table, lifted his head. Daniel turned toward Emily. Then he knelt. "You brought light back into a place that had forgotten how to shine," he said, voice low, sincere. "You didn't just heal two children. You healed me. You reminded me how to live again. And if James were here, I believe he'd be smiling." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Her eyes flooded instantly. "Emily Carter," Daniel said, holding out a simple ring. "Will you marry me?" The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was holy. Then Sophia shouted, voice ringing through the trees. "Mom, say yes." Laughter burst from Lucas. Emily nodded through her tears. "Yes, I will." Applause rippled through the backyard. Max barked as if cheering. And even Vera, who had been standing behind the porch, finally let her hands come together, slow but firm. Her eyes glistened with something close to peace. A week later, they stood in the same garden again. There was no silk, No orchestra, no diamond-studded aisle. Only grass beneath their feet, the sound of birds above, the smell of garlic bread and grilled rosemary meat. Emily walked slowly under the maple tree, Lucas and Sophia ahead of her, each holding a small bundle of daisies and sunflowers. She wore a pale blue dress. Daniel stood by the wooden table in his best shirt, nervous and calm all at once. The pastor, a soft-spoken man from the nearby chapel, waited by the altar, that same table, now transformed. He blessed their union with quiet words about faith, family, and fire. When Daniel slipped the ring onto Emily's finger, Sophia leaned close to Lucas and whispered, "Dad is definitely watching." Emily heard it. Her heart clenched and then softened. She squeezed Daniel's hand tighter. He wasn't just the gardener anymore. He hadn't been for a long time. He was the man she loved, the one who brought bread to her door when she had no appetite left, the one who restored fire to her home, not by pushing, but by simply lighting a flame and waiting. The one her children had started calling Dad. The one who never tried to replace James, but honored him with every memory they shared. After the quiet ceremony, they didn't throw rice. They didn't cut cake. They served meat and bread and corn from the grill, shared stories, and said grace beneath the wide sky. Daniel, now barefoot in the grass, held Emily close. Lucas chased Max across the garden. Sophia handed out slices of warm bread wrapped in napkins she'd folded herself. They didn't need a band. Their laughter was music enough. As the evening faded, the fire crackled low. The four of them sat close together on the old wooden bench, once a place of watching, now a place of belonging. Daniel whispered a prayer as embers glowed. "Thank you, Lord, for a fire that never dies." Emily looked at him, then at the children nestled beside them, arms tangled, faces smeared with sauce and joy. The garden no longer smelled like grief. It smelled like Sunday. And from that Sunday forward, it always would.